So, imagine this. A quiet, wealthy suburb in Kampala, Uganda is suddenly rocked by a brutal murder right at a family's front gate. The victim? A very well-known lawyer. The prime suspect? Her own husband, a brilliant and respected heart surgeon living thousands of miles away in Australia. What happened next was one of the wildest trials in the country's history, a real story about a power couple, a huge fortune, and a question about justice that still hangs in the air today.
You know, within just hours of Robina Kiyingi's murder, the whispers started. And they weren't just whispers. They quickly turned into a roar, and all of it was pointed at one man, her estranged husband, Dr. Agri Kiyingi. The question that absolutely gripped the entire nation was, did he really do it? All right, so to really understand how this incredible trial unfolded, we have to go back to the night it all started, to a violent, calculated attack that set this whole unbelievable story in motion. So picture it. Robina is pulling up to her own home, ready to end her day. But gunmen were lying in wait, and they ambushed her right there. Neighbors heard her scream, "Jesus, Jesus!" and then gunshots. By the time anyone got to her car, she was slumped over the wheel, the engine eerily still running. The killers, they were just gone, vanished. It was a cold, professional hit. The first question on everyone's mind, of course, was why? What was the motive? And to understand that, we have to pull back the curtain on the Kiyingi's marriage, because behind this perfect image of success, it was broken, it was bitter, and it was absolutely full of secrets. I mean, these two were once the definition of a power couple. They met in university, got married, and then built this incredible empire that stretched all the way from Uganda to Australia. But over time, that partnership just completely fell apart. By 2003, they weren't just living separate lives, they were locked in this really nasty divorce battle over a massive fortune. Things got even worse when Robina filed her own case in Australia, which apparently made the doctor furious. And let's be clear, this was way more than just a messy divorce. The fear Robina felt was real, and it was documented. She had told her friends, she had even told the police, that she was convinced her husband wanted her dead. In fact, years before the murder, their own housemaid claimed Dr. Kiyingi had tried to hire her to poison Robina. It's just a chilling, chilling piece of foreshadowing. So when Dr. Kiyingi was finally arrested, the prosecutors felt confident. They were sure they could paint a very clear picture for the court of exactly how he planned his wife's murder from halfway around the world. So here's the story the prosecution laid out. They said Dr. Kiyingi was the mastermind, pulling the strings from Australia. He funneled his instructions through an associate in Uganda. That guy then supposedly hired his own brother, a soldier, to be the triggerman. And where did the gun come from? Allegedly from a corrupt police officer. It was a complete and pretty damning narrative. And they believed they had the goods to prove it. They had phone records showing all the accused were talking to each other. They had what they said was a confession from the hitman himself. They even had a star witness who came forward and claimed she knew the whole plan. You add all that to the history of threats and the doctor's really strange, calm behavior at his own wife's funeral. Well, the case looked pretty solid. It all seems to fit together so neatly, doesn't it? It's a compelling story of greed and revenge and conspiracy. But as we're about to see, in a court of law, a good story sometimes isn't enough. And this right here is where the whole case starts to completely unravel. Dr. Kiyingi's defense team didn't just poke a few holes in the prosecution's argument, they basically took a sledgehammer to it. Dr. Kiyingi's defense was actually pretty simple. He said, look, I was in Australia. Yes, we were getting a divorce, but I chose the legal route, not murder. And as for his supposedly calm behavior, he explained that it wasn't coldness, it was pure shock and the absolute humiliation of being arrested at his wife's funeral in front of everyone. So that seemingly solid evidence, it started to crumble. The confession from the hitman was a huge problem for the prosecution. The alleged hitman had actually died in custody, and the court ruled his statement couldn't be used because it wasn't taken properly. The phone records? Yeah, they proved the men were in contact, but they didn't prove they were plotting a murder. And that star witness? Her credibility was shot when the judge basically asked, if you knew about a murder plot, why on earth didn't you warn anybody? And in the end, it all came down to this one fundamental legal idea. The prosecution, they built a case on suspicion, on things that looked bad, on hearsay. They had a really compelling theory, for sure, but what they didn't have was the hard, undeniable proof you need to convict someone of murder. So, After months and months of testimony that had the entire country on the edge of its seat, the moment of truth arrived. It was time for a verdict. And the outcome would leave so many people asking one very tough question. Was this a legal verdict, or was it really justice? The judge had to weigh everything against this incredibly high standard. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest bar we have in the legal system. And when he looked at everything the state had presented, his conclusion was simple. They hadn't cleared that bar. Not even close. So on December 10th, 2006, the verdict was read. Not guilty. Dr. Aggrey Kiyingi, Charles Berwanaho, and Bob Mugisha were all acquitted of murder. The judge ordered their immediate release. And just like that, they walked out of the courtroom as free men. The verdict sent absolute shockwaves across Uganda. People were outraged. For Rob and his family, it was just a devastating, soul-crushing blow. Dr. Kiyingi went back to his life and his career in Australia. But for everyone else, a brutal murder had happened, a huge trial had taken place, and in the end, no one was held responsible. To this very day, the murder of Robina Kiyingi is officially unsolved. And that leaves us right here with the one haunting question that the trial never came close to answering. The court did its job. It found these men not guilty based on the evidence. But the mystery, the real-life tragedy, remains. If they didn't do it, then who did?